Hello students, in the current video I will explain preference share capital. What is preference share capital? Types of preference shares, features, advantages and limitations of preference shares will be covered in this video. Whereas I have already made the video with regards to equity share capital. The link of that video I will share in the I button, in comment as well as in the description box. Please do watch that video to understand better the equity share capital concept. In this video I will cover only preference shares. So let's start this video. Money raised by issue of preference shares is called as preference share capital. In the sense, whatever money we raise from the preference shareholders as a source of finance for the business organization, that will be called as preference share capital. Why do we call preference shares? Because these shares are having preferential right over the equity shares. There are two types of preferential right they will get. In the form of getting the dividends, in the form of getting the initial amount while winding up of the company takes place. That is liquidation of company. The preferential right exists over equity shareholders in the form of getting dividend, in the sense before payment of dividend to equity shareholders, the dividend first paid to preference shares. Besides, while making the payment on liquidation, the preference shareholders will be paid first prior to equity shareholders. So this kind of a preferential right exists to preference shareholders. Preference shareholders eligible to get fixed amount of dividend every year, and these are called as corporate securities with no voting right. Preference shareholders will not have any voting right in the meetings and in the management of the company. Types of preference shares. There are total 8 types of preference shares. Now we will understand all those preference shares separately. First one is cumulative preference shares. Have right to claim dividend for those years which have no profits. In the sense, whenever the company do not earn any profit, it cannot pay dividend to preference shareholders. Then what will happen? Those dividends will be accumulated every year. Whenever company earns the profit, the past dividend as well as the current dividend together, it should be paid to the preference shareholders. That is called as cumulative preference shares. Dividend is getting accumulated and it will be paid whenever company earns profit. Whereas non-cumulative preference shares, in the sense, if a particular year the company did not earn any profit, then no dividend will be given to the preference shareholders. The dividend will not be accumulated every year. Redeemable preference shares have a fixed maturity period, and once the period is completed, it should be redeemed by the company. In the sense, the capital amount of the preference share should be given back to the preference shareholders. Irredeemable preference shares refers to the preference shares which will not be redeemed during the lifetime of the company. Whenever the company is going for liquidation, it will be redeemed. But presently in India, we don't have the concept called as irredeemable preference shares. According to the Companies Amendment Act 2003, every company should redeem the preference shares within 20 years of time. So we don't find irredeemable. All the preference shares we find redeemable only. Then fifth category is participating preference shares. What do you mean by this? Participating preference shares here refers to these preference shareholders will have right over the profit which is left over after distribution of dividend to equity shareholders. In that profit, they have certain right and they will get certain amount as extra amount, that is called as participating preference shares. Whereas non-participating preference shares, they will not get any amount out of the extra profits. They will get their fixed amount of dividend as per the agreement. Convertible preference shares will be given an option to convert their preference shares as equity shares after giving some time period. After the completion of certain time period, these shares will be converted as equity shares. And this conversion clause must exist in articles of association of the company. Non-convertible preference shares. These preference shares will not be converted as equity share during the lifetime of the preference shares. So these are the 8 categories of preference shares, or 8 types of preference shares we generally find. Now we will take up features of preference shares. When you talk about the features of preference shares, the first feature is preference over the equity share capital. In the sense, the preference shareholders having preference over equity shareholders with regards to receiving of dividend, with regards to receiving the initial investment or capital amount while liquidating the company. Not permanent capital. According to the Companies Act 2003, that is Companies Amendment Act 2003, companies cannot issue irredeemable preference shares. Every preference share should be redeemed within 20 years of time. So therefore, it is not a permanent capital for the company. Fixed rate of dividend. Even if the company has made huge profit, the preference shareholders will get fixed amount of dividend only. No voting right. Preference shareholder does not carry any voting right. They can vote in such matters which are directly influence their interest. They can acquire voting right if the dividends are not paid over a specified number of years. 2 years in case of cumulative preference shares, 3 years out of 6 in case of non-cumulative preference shares. Excluding these two situations, these people will not have any voting right. Dividend payment is not obligatory. It is not compulsory for the company to pay the preference dividend. Therefore, it is not obligation of the company to pay the dividend. Whenever company earns profit, the preference shareholder will get dividend for sure. Advantages of preference shares. Part of net worth. Preference share capital is a part of net worth. In the sense, while calculating the company's net worth, preference share is considered. Equity share capital and preference share capital both will be considered. Therefore, what will happen if it is considered as a net worth? What will be the advantage? It will reduce the debt equity ratio, which is significant for raising the loans from the market or financial institutions. Debt equity ratio of the companies plays a very significant role in borrowing the loans from the financial institution. Therefore, it is an advantage for the company that preference share is considered as a net worth of the company. No dilution of control over the management. Issue of preference shares will not dilute the rights and control over the management of the equity shareholders. Equity shareholders still have the same right to control the management as they have voting right. No charge or mortgage on asset. See, with regards to debentures, whenever we issue debentures, it will have a right or mortgage or charge over the fixed asset. So such kind of a charge will not exist with regards to issue of preference shares. So assets are free from any charge or any mortgage in the process of issue of shares. That is preference shares I am talking. Low cost of capital. Compared to equity shares, the cost of preference share capital is low. Therefore, they can be issued for meeting heavy capital expenditure or heavy capital expansion projects. The cost of capital will be less with regards to preference shares when compared to equity shares, not when compared to debentures. Please bear in mind. Fixed rate of dividend. As we have already aware, the rate of dividend will be fixed with regards to the preference shares. The fixed amount will be given as a dividend to preference shareholders. Now come to the disadvantages of preference shares. First one is accumulated dividend is a burden on the company. So in case of cumulative preference shares, what will happen? The dividend will be accumulated every year if the company incurs the loss. Whenever company earns the profit, that dividend will be cumulative dividend will be paid. So this will be treated as a burden for the company. Higher cost of capital. Compared to debentures, the cost of preference share capital is still higher. No tax benefit. Since the payment of dividend is an appropriation of profit, no tax benefit will be given. In case of debenture interest, tax benefit will be available. No voting right. Preference shareholders usually do not carry any voting right. Only equity shareholders will have the voting right. No participation in management and control. Since preference shareholders do not have any voting right, therefore these people do not have any say in the management and control of the company. Their decisions, their advices will not be taken in the process of regular decision making of the company. Fixed rate of dividend. The rate of dividend will be fixed with regards to the preference share capital. That will be treated as a disadvantage. Preference shareholders may not get any benefit in addition to their fixed rate of dividend. So if the company is earning a huge profit, will not get anything extra. So these are the basic disadvantages of the preference shares. I hope I made you understand the entire crux of the preference shares, types of preference shares, and what is preference shares, features, advantages, limitations. I wish you all the best. Thanks for watching the video. Do subscribe my channel, mentor the trusted guide, and motivate me to make more qualitative, informative videos. Thank you very much.